Hi guys, welcome to another edition of Plastic Models by a Regular Dude. This episode, don't really have any build updates for you. That'll be coming later. But I want to talk a little bit about the Model Air, the Vallejo paints, specifically the Model Air. I've mentioned a few times on videos and on various forums and the Google plus YouTube modelers group, my displeasure with Vallejo paints and how disappointed I am that you can't use them from the bottle. You know, it's Model Air paint, it's made for airbrushes, yet I'm constantly reading about people having to add, you know, more thinner, they're having to add retarders and flow enhancers and all this different kinds of stuff. And then there's the people that add Windex or you know, monkey saliva, whatever, to make the stuff work. And my frustration is why can't a product be used straight from the bottle, especially when it's advertised as Model Air for airbrushes. Now I realize that, you know, in any manufacturing process there's going to be differences, inconsistencies, and thicknesses of paint from one bottle to another. For example, I got the Model Air Panzer colors, and you know, most of them pretty liquidy feeling, you know, when you shake the bottle. But there was one color, the gray, that I used on my Tamiya Panzer IV that was really thick, and I had to thin it down. And I realize that kind of stuff happens, but you know, I've been working on the BF 109, and I had some real problems with one of the colors, and I came to some conclusions, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what I think the problem is and how I actually solved the problem, I believe. First of all, you have your handy dandy little bottle here, and you know, they're really, I love the bottles, they're cool. As Will Pattison said, though, it would be kind of nice if they had a strip or something where you could see how much paint you actually have left in the bottle, but it's all right. I just kind of tell by weight. But for the Model Master paints that I use, the Model Master acrylics, so far every bottle that I've used has been perfect. I've been able to spray it right from the bottle, no thinners, no nothing, just straight from the bottle. Now, granted, that could change in time, but I think one of the helpful things is I use this Badger Airbrush company stirring device. This works really well. Stick it down inside when the lid's off, turn it on until you can't feel any more crud on the bottom of the bottle, and it's mixed up really nice. Now, that would be great for the Model Air if it had a little more room in the neck of the bottle whenever you pop the cap off. For example, here's an empty bottle here. When you pop this off, you can't fit it in there. Now, I suppose you could modify one or whatever, but you know, it's something I don't want to mess with. I just want to be able to use the paint. So, you know, in reading, I have read recommendations that you put an agitator in the bottle, and my agitators are stainless steel nuts. I bought some and I cleaned them thoroughly to make sure there was no thread oils, tooling oils, anything like that on them, make sure it wouldn't contaminate the paint. So I drop one of these down in the bottle and then shake like a maniac till I could hear. When you first start shaking it, you can only hear it hitting part of the bottle. Once you can hear it hitting the bottom and you turn it upside down, you can see bubbles or whatever, then your paint's mixed up. Used the paint, worked okay. Tried it again on a specific color. As a matter of fact, it was the so anyway, it was one of the German aircraft colors, and it started getting cruddy. Wouldn't spray, having a lot of clogging issues, and so forth. So in my observations in the bottle, and from some other stuff that I've read, here's what I'm concluding that is causing the problems in my case with spraying Model Air. Okay, I dropped the nut in there to agitate it, and take the bottle and shake, 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 till I think it's shaken up really good. The problem with that, I think, and it makes sense, is that a lot of air is introduced to the actual paint itself by shaking it up like that. When you take the lid off and you look down in there, if you pop the top off, it's all foamy looking on top, just from all the air getting agitated into the paint. What that does, and I wish I could remember where, it might have been one of Paul Budzig's videos, I'm not sure, but the little bit of air getting in to the paint, and especially since this Vallejo paint is so, it's got such good pigment in it, it just kind of holds stuff in there better, I guess. Those bubbles, I mean, there's air in there, and that's what cures paint. So those bubbles are thickening the paint, in essence, for lack of a better term. It's kind of starting to thicken the paint. Also, I don't know if you've ever noticed, but when you pop the top off, there will often be a little bit of crud around the inside of the tip and the inside of the neck of the bottle. And what I've discovered, as I took a toothpick one time and pulled some out, and it was like partially cured paint. And no matter what, how much shaking and mixing you do, that's not going to change because it's already partially cured. So whenever I would squirt the paint or drop the paint into the paint cup of my airbrush, sometimes I would get what I lovingly refer to as paint boogers. It's just a big glob of snot-like material hanging out, and if you're not careful, or if it's small bits that are in the drop of paint you're squirting in, or if you stream it in instead of dropping, it can get in your airbrush and clog the airbrush up. So that's what I think was happening with me. Putting in the nut, shaking the paint up, that nut was dislodging some of that partially cured paint from the inside of the neck and the upper sides of the bottle, getting into my paint mixture. When I'm putting it in, if I don't catch it, it's getting in the airbrush and clogging it up. It just causes nothing but frustration. So I was about ready to give up on the Model Air paint. I didn't want to because I had two full sets that are, almost new. And I thought, you know what, I'm going to try and figure this out. So, and even whenever I was using it, I'd try thinners, and you'd end up with super thin paint and then a big glob, and it would clog, and it was a nightmare. And, maybe I was doing something else wrong. I don't know. But that's what I came up with. So, somewhere else, I think it was on the Vallejo site, someone talking about Vallejo paints on a video or in a pamphlet I saw, it recommended that you not shake the paint, but you roll it between your hands. Now, maybe that works. I don't know. Personally, I don't see how in tarnation you can mix a bottle of paint, even if you smash it. I don't see how you can mix it by rolling it between your hands. So, toss that idea. But I thought there's got to be some way that I can mix this paint up. And here's what I came up with. I do drop the nut inside the paint. However, instead of shaking the paint like a maniac, I simply hold it by the neck and shake it back and forth. Now, I don't know if you can hear that, but you can hear the nut moving freely inside of there. So in essence, what it's doing is it is swirling that nut back and forth. Sometimes I'll give it a little bit of a circular motion as well. It's scraping the pigment that is uncured off of the bottom of the bottle and getting it up into the suspension fluid or whatever you call it. And then it's just all mixing together. By doing it that way, I'm not introducing a lot of air into it. There might be a little bit getting in there, but I'm not getting a lot in there from, you know, shaking it back and forth like this, where that air cavity is at the top of the bottle. So it's almost like using this stirring device, but at a slower speed, obviously, and with the nut in here instead. So whenever I first put the nut in this bottle and I started shaking around, I couldn't hear anything. I mean, I could kind of feel the stainless steel nut inside moving around, and it would hit the sides of the bottle, but not very much. At first I couldn't hear anything at all, but I just kept going with it, kept shaking it. Eventually I started hearing a little bit, and a little bit more and more and more and more, until finally it's just totally loose in the bottom. And I believe it has totally scraped the bottom clean of all of the pigments and got them into the actual and into the rest of the paint bottle. So after I did that, I decided to give it a try, and I sprayed my 1/25th scale Tiger 1 that I'm working on, and it takes a lot of paint because it's a big model, but I had no issues at all. The only thing I had to do, and I expected it, and I was prepared for it, and I don't mind doing it, is I had a couple of Q-tips handy, with a bowl with some of the Vallejo cleaner, airbrush cleaner, with just a little bit in the bottom, just enough to wet the end of a Q-tip or cotton bud for you across the pond. And every once in a while, just swirl that onto the needle tip sticking out of the end of the airbrush. Clean that off real quick. Give it a quick shot onto my blotting paper, and kept painting. And I was able to paint that model with absolutely no frustration at all. It worked flawlessly. So I thought the real test is when I come back and use the bottle and mix it again to see if it does the same thing. So a few days later, I was going to paint the wheels of the vehicle. So I had those all lined up and ready to go. I did the same thing with the paint, back and forth, made sure it was all mixed up really well, put it in the airbrush, and sprayed like a maniac. No problems. And the thing is I didn't have to add any thinner, I didn't have to add any flow enhancers, I didn't have to add any retarders, nothing like that. It worked straight from the bottle. So what I think I've discovered is, the trick is, you can put an agitator in it and you can shake it really well, but just not in a violent top to bottom motion, but in a back and forth swirling motion. Okay, that'll get it all mixed up without getting the air inside of there, which is what I think is starting to congeal the paints and making them thick and making those little pieces break loose from the inside of the bottle into the rest of your paint. So I think I've got it whipped, and I've used 3 different colors using that method from 2 different sets of paint. So there's, you know, a variety of factors that can be involved. One of them could have sat out on a dock in Michigan for 3 weeks in 0-degree weather and it still worked fine. Whatever. It wasn't all the same paint, and it wasn't all from the same batch. Okay, different colors and different sets, and they worked fine. So I think that is the secret of avoiding frustration for me in the Vallejo paints, model air paints anyway. So if you're having trouble with the model air paint and you're having problems with clogs and stuff like that, you might give this a try. Now, if you've got a bottle that you've already pretty well ruined from doing it that way, you're either gonna have to suffer through it or find a way to strain it, or just buy a new bottle of paint. But any new bottles, you might want to try that. Drop something in there to shake it up, and just use side to side swirling motion to mix it up instead of top to bottom violent shake. Okay, So that is my thoughts and my findings on curing the Vallejo Model Air paint problem. So with that, I think and pretty confidently I can say that it can be used straight from the bottle without adding anything to it. Now, a flow enhancer might help with the tip, needle tip drying up, or maybe the retarder, whatever. But to me, that's not an issue. And if I don't have to add anything to the paint, I don't want to do it. So I'm using it straight out of the bottle, and no problems. And some of you may have no problems regardless of what you use with the Vallejo paints. But I have had the problem, and I've heard of other people having similar problems. So anyway, that's my thoughts on the Vallejo paints. Hopefully it'll give somebody some relief if they're having trouble, and give it a try, see if it works, and hopefully you can use this stuff without any headaches, because it really is, once it's on, I really like the way the Model Air looks. It gives you a nice finish, not quite flat, but it's not gloss, and it just really snuggles down and sticks around surface detail and panel lines, rivets, you name it. It really settles in nicely, doesn't pool up, and I've found that if I spray just a little bit too much and it looks like it's puddled up, if I don't mess with it, I've experimented with this, I just leave it. I don't try and wipe it off, nothing, I just leave it. It self-levels, and it doesn't, other than the paint maybe being a little more opaque in that spot, it doesn't leave a ridge or any weird surface stuff going on. So anyway, that's my thoughts. Hopefully it's helpful for somebody. Leave some comments if you have anything to add or ask, and especially if it works out for you, leave some comments and let me know that it worked out for you if you try this. Alright, so anyway, that's it for this edition of Plastic Models by a Regular Dude, and I'll see you next time.